Week, which was in the book of Genesis, the 28th chapter, studying the life of Jacob. As we've talked about it, what we have wonderfully before us is probably the most detailed life of anybody in the entire scriptures. There's more information on this one man's life than the Lord Jesus. I mean, we have a detail of his birth, his relationship with his brother, his relationship with his parents, his relationship with his wives, his relationship with his God, his relationship with his uncle. It spans years of time, and we're not even close to the middle of the story, and yet it's taken us months to just work our way through this detailed story. And I don't think God has given us this much detail for us to move quickly and not really think our way through why he's telling us so much about the life of Jacob. I think one of the takeaways is the reality that if God's grace and mercy and sovereignty could accomplish his plans through Jacob, he can do it through anybody. And I think that's one of the great takeaways of the life of Jacob. Jacob is about ready to leave home, probably for the first time to this extent, as a 40-something-year-old man in search of something that's going to make his mom happy, going to make his dad proud, and is going to satisfy some things in his own heart and life. So we're going to pick up in chapter 28, verse 10 through the end of the chapter, and then we'll go back and make some comment. It's a pretty familiar part. If you've done any study in the book of Jacob, this is one that is pretty highlighted in his life. So Jacob leaves Beersheba. That is where they have established themselves for some time. It's in the lowermost part of the land of Israel. It's as far down as present-day Gaza. Today it would be getting very close to the border with Egypt. So they're that far down in the land of the promised land, and he is now going to be heading back towards the home of his mother. He came to a certain place and he stayed there that night because the sun had set. We pretty well have an idea of where that place is, and in a minute we'll look at the map. Because of what he refers to this place, it has been named that pretty much ever since, and they've done archaeological digs to pretty much establish exactly where it is in the land of Egypt. While he is asleep, verse 12, he has a dream. Behold, there was a ladder or a staircase set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give it to you and your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and the east, to the north and to the south. And in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and I will keep you wherever you go. I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. He was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So early in the morning, Jacob took the stone that he had put under his head, and he set it up for a pillar and poured oil on the top of it. He called the name of the place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at the first. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, If God will be with me and keep me on this way that I go, I will give me bread to eat, clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace. Then the Lord shall be my God, and this is a stone which I have set up as a pillar, shall be God's house, and of all that you give me, I will give you a full tenth. I will give a full tenth to you. Well, Genesis chapter 28, verses 10 through 21, to your outline, you can see the journey that Jacob is going to make. He is down in Beersheba, which is the bottom, the most southern part of that red line. He will go skirting on his journey the cities that are not the cities that we know today as Bethlehem and Jerusalem, in approximately 11 miles north of Jerusalem, he will spend the night. That area has become known as Bethel. There's a different name today, but they think they have discovered the old city of Bethel, and it's approximately 12 miles north of Jerusalem. He will continue his journey for maybe a week. It's 300 and some miles across this region. It was a regularly traded route, an interior route down into the center of the Holy Land, and it was the route that you would take if you were heading from the Afghanistan, Persian area empire, the Babylonian Empire, where today Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, all that movement of trade, the trade routes, would have taken this route all the way to Egypt. So he's on a pretty well-traveled route, but he's finally got himself alone, and I think he's finally in a place where God can begin to deal with the things that are going on in his life. And I've titled it, The Journey from Home and Back Again. And I think that part of the thing that God is trying to do in revealing the details, such details of this story, is because this is the typical journey of all mankind, each and every one of us. We've come from a family of origin riddled with sin and dysfunction. We have, as our foreparents, Adam and Eve, been kicked out of the promised land like Jacob has been. We were convinced that the problem could be solved by going off to a far-off land, as Jesus even tells the story of the prodigal son. Beyond that land of promise, we were hoping to find what we were and what we are desperately in need of. But along the way, God continued to track us, and he continues to track Jacob. And finally, at this point, he's revealing himself to Jacob. He's revealing himself to us in his constant attempt to bridge the gap that we created between heaven and earth. And that's this ladder that is coming down out of heaven. And it's this realization on Jacob's part, though he doesn't quite get it, that God is tracking him and is with him and is trying to bring him into a relationship with him that is going to be unique amongst all the peoples of the earth. And we have that same type of opportunity to have a relationship. However, even when we become aware of his plans for us, our first response is to enter into negotiation process. Well, God, if you'll do this, then I'll do that. If God, you're real, then do this. You're going to see at the end of this chapter, Jacob, the great negotiator, and he's not done negotiating because he's going to spend the next 20 years negotiating with his father-in-law, but he begins his relationship with God as a negotiation. And we're not sure if we can or wish to take him at his word and trust in him. And so I think mankind is in this negotiation relationship with God. And I think that it may be part of the negotiation. If we can be good enough, then that puts God under some kind of obligation to us. And the whole reality of the message of salvation is that we can never be good enough. There's never a way that we can have God obligated to us in any way. It is purely because he has sought us out and come to rescue us. God, however, in this story of Jacob is not in the negotiation business. This idea, if you will do this, then I will do that, is basically Jacob's negotiation. If you keep your word and bless me, I'll believe in you and give back to you. This is not how it works. And for the next 20 years, Jacob will come to understand the futility of human negotiations with God. To his detriment, picking up even more baggage of spiritual dysfunction for the next 20 years along the way. And then he is going to get into a confrontation with God that there is no negotiation left. And we'll get to that as he becomes the man known as the wrestler. In verses 10 through 13, the journey begins with a dream. He's by himself. He's alone, maybe for the first time. He's in the wilderness. There may be a few other people with him, and we'll look at that down the road, but for all intents and purposes, away from mom and dad, away from his brother, and his journey now begins with this dream. It's this ladder that is descending from heaven to earth. Angelic beings are moving back and forth on it, and the Lord himself is at the top of this. And at the very outset of Jacob's journey in life, God makes himself known to Jacob. Jacob is now in a place and a time in his life where God has his attention. And God is making it very clear that he desires to bridge the distance between himself and mankind, and that even his angels ascending and descending upon the earth are accomplishing those purposes. And so I think Jacob gets a glimpse into the spirit world that the rest of us have no clue is happening around us, and yet God's angels are descending and ascending, accomplishing his plans and purposes in much the same way that the fallen angelic hosts that we studied in Sunday mornings for months are accomplishing the plans and purposes of their prince, Satan. The angelic beings are moving at God's beckoning to accomplish his plans and purposes on earth, and Jacob gets a little dream of this. On the top of page 24, God stands above the bridge that connects itself from his presence to the location of Jacob, right where Jacob is. And I think that's important too, because God meets us where we are. He comes to our circumstances, our situations, and he encounters us. From the revelation of the New Testament, as we are made aware that this heavenly bridge is none other than Jesus and the work he's accomplished for us on the cross. And that has become the only bridge possible for mankind to have that kind of a relationship with their Creator. So Jacob has this incredible dream. It brings him to the reality of this monotheistic God who is in control of all these angelic beings, and they're moving back and forth at his will and his desire. And Jacob is getting a little insight into, and you remember, as we looked last week, I don't think this God has been embraced by Jacob, because when he talks to his father, he says, "Your God." He's not admitted that Jehovah God is the God that he has chosen to worship and commit his life to. But it is this God, and it's how God's going to introduce himself. I am the God of Abraham. You know, you've been talking about me as your father's gods. You are now going to have a face-to-face encounter with him, and it is I. In verses 13b and through 15, the dream then becomes a promise. This dream is a reestablishment of God's covenant promise that he had made with Abraham. We haven't studied that in this text, but we've looked at the Abrahamic covenant as we looked at God's, our worldview of the nation of Israel that goes all the way back to the establishment of his covenant with Abraham, which is Jacob's great-grandfather. And God has made the reestablish that covenant with Jacob's father, Isaac. But this is the first time that there seems to be an encounter of God with Jacob reestablishing the covenant he had made with Abraham so many years before. The promise is basically his father's and his grandfather's God is choosing to be Jacob's God in this same covenant relationship. This covenant remains unconditional in nature. If you'll remember, when the covenant was first established between God and Abraham, both of these men have the covenant established to them while they're asleep. The first one, God made Abraham fall into a deep sleep, if you'll remember. And as God cuts the covenant, he does it by himself. You remember the purpose of the covenant, the sacrifices of the covenant. And we learned this from one other Old Testament passage, is when the two parties walked through the animals, slaughtered and filleted on either side of the path. When they got to the other side of those sacrificed animals, they were in fact confirming with each other that if I break this covenant, may it be unto me as it has been to these animals. And it was unconditional. It didn't have anything to do with whether you kept your end of the bargain. I was going to make a commitment that no matter what, I was going to keep mine or let it be to me as these slaughtered animals. Abraham sleeps through the whole thing. Why? Because God was going to establish that, Abraham, you have nothing to do with this. We call it an unconditional covenant as compared to other covenants that God will make with the children of Israel. This one had nothing to do with Abraham's disobedience or obedience. God said, I'm going to take the full responsibility for making this happen. And he does that with his grandson, who is also asleep in the middle of a dream, having this covenant rehearsed again to him. It involved the same things. It involved, although there was a little, he adds a few things, and I think it's for Jacob's well-being. Land was included in the Abrahamic covenant. He reiterates, this land is going to be yours and your people. You will have innumerable offspring. To Abraham, it was like the sand of the shore and the stars of the sky. He gets the same type of commitment from God concerning the prodigy that Jacob will have in developing a nation, and then a large, innumerable number of offspring. There would be global blessings to all mankind through this covenant, which was also given to Abraham. The global blessing will be that through this covenant, the Savior will be born. And that will be the blessing to all mankind. Along with to Abraham, he says, those who curse you, I will curse, and those who bless you, I will bless. And so all nations who bless the nation of Israel are blessed by God, according to the Abrahamic covenant. This one, I think, goes farther in the fact that all mankind is going to be blessed, because it will be one of Jacob's sons, Judah, to whom the Lord Jesus will be part of that tribe. And so it will be from Jacob's son, Judah, that we will trace the lineage all the way to the Lord Jesus. And the gospel records bring it all the way back through this lineage too, all the way to Abraham and all the way to Adam. What's interesting is he also tells him, I'm going to give you personal protection. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to return you to the land, to this land, after your journey, and I am always going to be with you. There is this assurance of God's personal presence in Jacob's life. This is incredible that God has selected this one man to whom he was going to bless and accomplish these things. And nothing is said in here that is conditional on Jacob's part. The person who begins the negotiation is Jacob, not God. God doesn't go, I'm going to do this if you do this. I'll do this if you'll do this. At this point, this is unconditional. I'm going to do this and accomplish this. You just have to believe me. Well, Jacob wakes up, and now he has this outward response to this dream. And I think it reveals some things. I think we want to give Jacob, because of our ability to have a view of the scriptures from Genesis to Revelation, if we were just to look at this story as something written by Moses thousands and thousands of years ago, it really gives us an understanding that Jacob is really grappling with, who is this monotheistic God that my father and grandfather have worshipped? And I don't think he has clarity on the character and the nature of this God, and he has a lot of baggage with him from the culture and the people that he has grown up around. He has not grown up in a monotheistic culture. And the wife that he's going to go take, Laban, is not a monotheist. He will marry a wife who's been brought up in a pagan, idolatrous, polytheistic home. So the polytheistic ideas, the multiple gods, satisfying different gods and doing different things, trying to figure out what will appease them and please them, that's how he's grown up. And we get this idea of this monotheistic, omnipresent, personal, loving, kind God. But I think that's reading a lot into Jacob, who hasn't even admitted yet that this is his God and what this God's character and nature. And I think you get a little glimpse of this as he begins to respond after waking up from this dream. I think it reveals that he has a misunderstanding of the place. This place is just, in reality, like any other place. It is not the place, because God is omnipresent. God is going to be with Jacob every single night. This is not a special place. Everywhere Jacob lays his head, God will be there. Every day of Jacob's life from here on out, God has promised him, I will be with you. This place that he calls the house Bethel, the house of God, the house of El, that's where we get like Beth. Beth is always the house of Bethlehem, the house of bread. The Beth is bread, the place of. And so he thinks that this somehow is a unique and special place. And so he wants to put up a pillar. He wants to pour oil on the stone. He wants to commemorate this as like, this is the gate to heaven. No. God is trying to enter into a vertical relationship with you every step of your life, not just here in this place. This isn't the gate of heaven any more than you could pick the place that's the gate of hell. The gate of the location where God is moving back and forth between mankind is everywhere on this planet at all times, trying to reveal himself. But I think Jacob, in his worldview, formed very much in paganism, not that Isaac and Rebekah have been, but all the influence that's around him, even his brothers' wives, I think this reveals he doesn't have as clear of an idea of this monotheistic God as we think he should or he did. I think there's a misunderstanding of the situation. God didn't need a house or a location where he could involve himself with his people. That's going to become clearer and clearer as the scriptures move along. And it was part of the issue with the whole Christian churches. They had churches that didn't have idols in them. That our God doesn't live in houses made with hands. He's above that. He's beyond that. He lives beyond the need for us to have a house for him to dwell in. And I think there's a misunderstanding of the circumstances. God did not there's no indication that God wanted him to pour oil all over a rock. He wanted it to be poured on Jacob. He was wanting to anoint Jacob as the chosen servant to accomplish his plans and purposes. And as God anoints individuals with oil throughout the scriptures, it's in order to prepare them to be the vessel to whom God is going to use. Pouring oil on the rock gives us a misunderstanding. God is wanting to pour himself into Jacob's life, anoint Jacob as the recipient of his covenant blessing, and bless him and be with him throughout the remainder of his life. And I think these actions demonstrate he may not be as far along. I don't think he went to Bible college and came out with a seminary degree by this time in his life, and he's ready to serve the Lord. He's scrambling in his mind with, who is this monotheistic God? What is he like? What is he expecting from us? What is his desire for us? We've jumped ahead thousands of years and hundreds of pages of theology. And the most great thing is we've got a glimpse of Jesus. So our clarity on this monotheistic, omnipresent, personal, powerful God, we have a clue on. Way more than he did, because we've seen him in the face of Jesus. So I think this gives us a little idea that he's wrestling with how to respond to this dream. Top of page 25. Though monotheism has been passed down to him through his fathers, the nature and character of this God is still a mystery to them. It would be for us too, and this is my passage in 2 Corinthians 4:6. The God who said, "Let light shine in the darkness," has shone in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. So we may take for granted that they had as clear an understanding in the nature and the character of this God who is moving in their life and trying to establish this relationship with them. But I think this is the story of humanity. God is wanting to have a relationship with mankind. It's hard for us to grasp who this creator is, what he's expecting, and what his hope is. And it's not until we get a glimpse of him in the person and work of Jesus that God becomes more clear. And Jesus said that was one of his purposes for coming, was to make known the will of his Father. The lack of his understanding of the character of God revealed also revealed in Jacob's inward response, which is probably more disappointing than his outward response. You know, I could get that. I mean, even Peter wanted to do that, right? Peter sees Jesus and he sees Moses and Elijah. He's like, oh, we got to build a tabernacle right here. We got to commemorate this spot. This spot is so incredible. We need to build something right here to make sure everybody remembers that this, you know, there is that natural, like, I got to mark the event, mark the spot. So you can kind of appreciate that Jacob would want to do that. But the next response, I think, is even a little more disappointing, because it becomes kind of a vow that Jacob makes to the Lord. But I think there's always a problem with a vow if it begins with the word if. And God had, you might expect this if God hadn't just promised him what he promised him. But God has promised to personally protect him, to bring him right back to this spot after his journey was over, and to never leave him. And what's Jacob's vow? Lord, if you'll do it, then I'll. They call this a first-class condition, and it's perfect in all human negotiations. If you do this, I'll do this. It's even in most modern weddings. You know, if you do this, then I'll do this. And if you don't, then I won't. And if you don't fulfill your side, then I'm not going to fulfill my side. That's a human contract. He wants to go into a human contract with God when God has just made a covenant with him, which means I'm going to keep my end of this bargain, Jacob, no matter what you do. I love you. I have chosen you. I am going to work through you, my plans and purposes regardless. I will never leave you or forsake you. You will return eventually to the promised land. All of those promises are the same kind of promises God gives to us, and we still want to enter into negotiation with him. Well, Lord, if you keep your end of the bargain, then, and then we tell him what we're going to do. And what's he want to give him? He wants to give him 10%. I'm thinking, that's worse. That's the worst tip a waitress can get, right? Nowadays, like 10% is like, I guess I did an okay, average job. I filled your coffee twice and got you water and came back to see if you needed anything else, and I got 10%. That's not even a tip in today's culture. But that's what Jacob, if you do what you say you're going to do, I'll tip you, and you can be my God. Man, there's something wrong with that. I think it's, yeah. It is. It's insulting to the Lord, I think. But it just reveals this worldview he has of how he's the negotiator. He's going to be a good negotiator with his uncle. I mean, he's going to get burned for 20 years, but he's finally going to learn his lesson enough to get back and renegotiate things with his uncle and come out way ahead. So he's a good negotiator, and he feels like what I can do negotiating with people, I can do with God. This is a classic negotiation phrase. We call it a first-class condition. If you, then I. This works in negotiation of human interests and contractual agreements. However, this is a covenant agreement between God and Abraham, reestablished with Jacob. No negotiations are needed. And as a matter of fact, it is very out of place here. It is completely out of place. And as Gene said, I'm sure somewhat offensive to God, who wants to have a covenant relationship with him, not a contractual agreement that both sides have to keep up their end of the bargain. God's covenant with Abraham was this in so many words: I will keep my end of the covenant regardless. It is not based on any action or future action on your part. And I don't think Jacob fully grasps that. And I don't know that we always grasp that. The new covenant that we are partly recipients of through what Christ did on the cross is unconditional. I have done everything necessary to have a relationship with you, and I'm not looking for anything in return to make sure you keep your end of the bargain. I am saving you completely by grace through faith. It is a gift, not of anything you can possibly do, because the first thing you'll do is boast on how it was that you were able to enter in the negotiation with me and earn your way. Paul says those words almost verbatim. For it is by grace that you're saved through faith, and that not of yourself. It is a gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast. It's an unconditional covenant relationship God wants to have with us. And he might be, as Gene said, offended when we go, well, God, if you'll keep up your end, I'll do X, Y, Z. This vow in the last second to the last paragraph before the last sentence, this vow shows a misunderstanding of all mankind in their relationship with a loving and merciful Creator. God does not need our stuff in order to bless us. I'll give you 10% if you'll bless me. His blessings are so outstanding that our only response is to give him everything, starting with our heart. A tip of 10% to God is a nice gesture. However, we give more than that to a good restaurant. What we give to him in light of what he has done, he has given to us, is not open to negotiations. We have been bought with a price, Paul says, and therefore we glorify God with all of us, because it all belongs to him. And we dare not enter into negotiation with the God. And if and when we do, I think we miss out on all the blessings of having an unconditional, loving relationship with our Creator. Christian maturity leads us to change our words from if then to since then. Since you have done all of this for me, how could I not give you back everything? Thank you for giving me the resources that I have. I will use them to honor you, because all my resources are yours. All of my strength belongs to you. All of my will and my desire and my heart is yours. Since he has done all of these things for me. Not if he does these things, then I will. And I think that's one of the great lessons we get as we look into Jacob's. But God's not done with Jacob. Unfortunately, I think this lesson is this cycle in his heart, and this kind of this resistance and this conflict that he has with all of the people in his life is a demonstration that he has this resistant, conflicting relationship with God. And we're going to read how that unfolds over the next 20 years as he heads into his uncle's part of town and meets one of his daughters. And then we get into kind of a most bizarre love story. Any thoughts or comments on the text that we just looked at, this dream? We're given such incredible detail.
A lot of information revealed in dreams. In Daniel.
Yeah, and then the scriptures say that in the last days people will dream dreams, and spending time in the Middle East and still hearing reports coming out of pockets in the Middle East of hundreds and maybe thousands of people in the Middle East who are coming to faith in Christ, specifically because they've had dreams concerning the person and work of Christ, and they've come looking for the answer to that and are finding it with Christian missionaries, broadcast websites that are being flooding that part of the world to tell them about Christ. And I've read report after report. I was so skeptical of a particular man's report. When I went to Israel, I took the book with me and showed it to men in Jerusalem and in Egypt and said, is this true? Is this really happening here? And they're like, oh yeah, we actually know this guy. These things are happening here. Wow. You'll never hear about that in the media, how massive numbers of conversions are happening in the Middle East to Christianity.
One of the things that strikes me is the location of the dream, and then Jacob marks it with the stone that he used for his pillow. There are any number of occasions in the Bible where a location is deemed holy or sacred or special.
Special,
because
yeah.
of encounters with God. So this is just one of those, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, we don't have any precedent before that.
this
And
may
then
be the
it's
first occasion.
It seems like in the next one, if I'm not mistaken, is when they stack the 12 stones as they cross over the Jordan as they're ready to head back into the promised land. But that has a real specific purpose. God says, because I want you to put these rocks here so that when you're back in the area and you're goofing around with your kids and you're playing in the river and enjoying it, and they say, what are these stones here for? You'll be able to tell them what happened when we crossed the Jordan. So there are times when this one
doesn't rise to that level. Because you kind of downplayed it. I mean, in your discussion just now.
And nowhere else do we read about it again as a sacred place. You know, even like where Moses was going to offer Isaac.
So the
you know,
name,
rock
the name of the location,
Bethel, has been.
It wasn't named because of that.
It was. Yeah, the name was changed from Luz to Bethel, and even through the time of Jesus, Bethel is still. That name stuck.
Okay, so that's significant.
And the name stuck until the Crusades and the reinvasion of other groups, and the name of the city was changed. But they think they know exactly where it is. So a city was developed there in time.
You know, I grew up in a Christian home, and I remember the words all the time: "Don't worry about anything, pray about everything." And I was a young man who was always in trouble.
That's what your wife said.
And every time I get in trouble,
Still
I say,
is.
Lord, if you take care of this, I'll tell you what I'll do.
Yeah.
I remember praying that as a young man, you know.
Yeah.
I could do that.
Oh my goodness.
And then
Yes.
I wouldn't do it, then I'd come back and pray, you know, this time I'll do it.
I had that experience. I was so committed to God for about 30 minutes when I was about 3rd grade, and our dog got out. I love that dog. And I swore, God, I would serve him anyway. It lasted about 30 minutes and we got the dog back. But I was crying in tears until the dog came back. Yeah, I told God I'd do anything. If you'll bring my dog back, Lord, I'll do anything.
Well, look at you now.
And then the
I'm
dog
saying
came
that
back. Well, it sure wasn't from that conversation. Oh, I remember crying on the couch, pleading with God, bring my dog back.
Did you believe he did it?
I might have given him some credit for it. I'm probably so excited I got my dog back, but it's
Didn't work.
off of it went. But I think this is what God has been, he's revealing to us through Jacob. This is what he's been doing in the hearts of mankind. Continuing to this day, came to seek and to save those who were lost. He's been seeking out. I don't think there'll be a human being that'll stand before God the Father that will have to deny that somehow God reached out to him at some point, reached out to her at some point in an attempt to reveal himself to them.
Do you think that we really believe he is God if we negotiate? Because isn't that a little arrogant of us?
Yeah, because
So
somehow we
are we
think.
really even believing it?
Right. Yeah. That negotiation with God but it's a human tendency to, because I think we can put God obligated now. He's obligated because I've done my part. Now he has to do his part.
Isn't that kind of funny?
And I think we obligate God, or we attempt to obligate him.
It's a good thing he's slow to anger.
So
Yeah, it is.
Yes. Yeah. I think the Old Testament, there's times when God says, who do I have to answer to? I'm not going to answer. There's no one who I will have to answer to, give an account of
That's
myself.
what I mean.
Yeah.
It seems crazy.
Yeah. And even when Job asks a little bit, God's quick to okay, Job, let's go for it. Where were you when I did this? And where were you when I did that? You want to negotiate with me? You don't realize that. I think that's the main issue. He didn't understand the character of this monotheistic God, who his father and his grandfather knew. he hasn't grasped it yet. So, thanks for being here tonight. We'll pick up the love story has just begun. It's gonna be more like Sister Wives from Utah here in a minute.
Wife-in-laws.
Yeah, you can shut that off. Let's close our time in prayer.